Somewhere in what is now Iraq, roughly 60,000 years ago, a group of humans lowered a body into the earth. They didn't have to. Animals abandon their dead. Bones weather, scatter, disappear. That is the efficient solution. That is what evolution, uninterrupted, tends to produce. But these humans did something else entirely. They dug a pit. They arranged the body with deliberate care. And according to pollen evidence recovered from the site, evidence that sparked one of the most debated arguments in all of paleoanthropology, someone may have placed flowers around the dead.
That detail changes everything, because it means that at least 60 millennia before the invention of language as we know it, before cities, before agriculture, our species was doing something profoundly strange. We were grieving. On purpose.
The modern assumption is that grief is a malfunction, a glitch in the emotional operating system, something to be shortened, medicated, processed efficiently, and ultimately overcome. The dominant cultural framework, at least in the industrialized West, treats mourning as a temporary derailment before the return to productivity. Even Sigmund Freud, writing in 1917, described grief as a kind of psychological work to be completed. Mourning labor, he called it, with a clear endpoint: detachment from the lost object, reinvestment in the living world.
The implication was that prolonged grief is pathological, a failure of the system. Psychiatry followed. The DSM-5, for the first time in 2013, classified extended bereavement as a potential disorder. The message, across more than a century, has been consistent. Grief is the problem. But here's what actually happened.
Grief is approximately 300,000 years old. That is the conservative estimate for when Homo sapiens emerged as a species. But the behavior appears even earlier. Neanderthal burial sites like Shanidar Cave in Iraq, excavated by Ralph Selecki of Columbia University beginning in 1951, suggest that deliberate interment of the dead may predate our own species entirely. This is not incidental. When an organism consistently expends energy on a behavior, energy that produces no food, no offspring, no immediate survival advantage, evolutionary biology asks a hard question. What is this for?
Because nothing in evolution is free. The neurological architecture of grief, the social pain, the obsessive recall, the disruption of appetite and sleep is not a bug. It is a feature, deeply, expensively conserved across millions of years. The clearest evidence comes from neuroscience. Naomi Eisenberger at UCLA published a landmark study in 2003 in the journal Science, demonstrating that social pain, the pain of loss, rejection, and separation, activates the same neural regions as physical pain, specifically the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex, a region previously associated exclusively with the experience of bodily injury.
The brain does not distinguish, at the hardware level, between a broken bone and a broken bond. This is not metaphor, it is architecture. The implication, understood through the lens of evolutionary psychology, is significant. Physical pain evolved to signal damage to the organism, to force behavioral change, to prevent further injury. If social pain uses the same circuitry, it likely evolved for the same reason. Grief isn't the wound. Grief is the alarm. So, what was the alarm signaling in ancient humans? Consider the social structure of a Paleolithic band, roughly 30 to 150 individuals, as modeled by Robin Dunbar of Oxford University across decades of primate and human research. Within that band, every single relationship carried survival weight. A lost hunter meant fewer calories. A lost elder meant lost navigational knowledge, lost memory of drought patterns, lost understanding of which plants were toxic in that particular valley. The death of one person didn't just remove a body from the group. It created a rupture in a collective intelligence system that had no backup. Grief, then, may have evolved not to mourn the individual, but to force the group to register the full magnitude of what had just been lost. The pain was a census. Ancient humans seem to have understood this instinctively. The archaeological record of mortuary behavior, studied extensively by Paul Pettit at Durham University, shows that early burial practices weren't designed to end grief quickly. They were designed to structure it, to give it form, duration, and social choreography. The Natufian people of the Levant, a pre-agricultural culture dating to roughly 15,000 years ago, buried their dead beneath the floors of their homes. They lived, ate, and slept directly above their dead for months, sometimes years. The people who arguably invented civilization began it by refusing to separate the living from the dead. This was not failure to move on. This was deliberate proximity, an enforced remembrance, a refusal to let the social weight of the lost person dissolve too quickly. Return now to that pit in the Zagros Mountains. 60,000 years ago, a body placed with care, possibly flowers. What was actually happening there wasn't irrational. It wasn't primitive sentimentality. It was a group of humans deploying the most sophisticated social technology available to them: ritual. Ritual, as understood by anthropologist Barbara King of the College of William and Mary in her 2013 work, How Animals Grieve, functions as a container for emotion too large to be processed individually. It externalizes internal states. It makes invisible bonds visible, even, especially, after they have been severed. And here is the part that should stop the modern reader entirely. Every grieving ritual humans still practice, the wake, the funeral, the anniversary, traces a direct, unbroken line back to that pit. The ritual never ended. In 2022, researchers at the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology published findings in the journal iScience, describing the oldest known burial site attributed to Homo naledi, a small-brained hominin, at Rising Star Cave in South Africa, dated to at least 300,000 years ago. The assumption had been that elaborate burial behavior required large brains, symbolic thought, and language. The Rising Star findings dismantled that assumption cleanly, which leaves an unsettling possibility. Grief, structured, ritualized, intentional grief, may be older than our species, older than abstract thought as we currently define it. It may be a behavior so fundamental to social existence that it evolved independently, multiple times, across multiple hominin lineages.
Not as a response to death, as a requirement for life in groups. The next time a human attends a funeral and finds themselves performing rituals that feel simultaneously strange and necessary, standing in a specific room, speaking in lowered voices, wearing a particular color, they are doing something that has not changed in any essential way for 300,000 years. The specific garments are different, the specific words are different, the specific deities invoked, if any, are different.
But the underlying act, gathering to register a rupture, to hold the weight of loss in a shared space, to refuse to let the dead simply disappear, is identical to what a small band of humans did in a cave with flowers and dirt and hands. Grief was never the enemy of survival. It was one of the first things that made survival worth the trouble.